SpaceX Starlink Generation 4. Is it worth the upgrade? How does it compare to a Generation 3, 2, or even 1? Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much once again joining me for tea time. Today we have a little bit of misty morning and focus combination. So good, so good. I hope you're joining me with your cup of tea, maybe a cup of coffee, hanging out, talking tech, talking photo, talking video. Today is a technology day. We're gonna be talking about SpaceX Starlink. I saw an article over on PC Magazine and they did a direct comparison between the Generation 4, the brand new edition. If you don't know, a Generation 4 Starlink kit is actually a Generation 4 dish and a Generation 3 router. Some people get it confused. I know it doesn't sound right, but that's just simply the way it is. Dish, Generation 4, router, Generation 3. That's how the latest and greatest kits come out to you. So PC Magazine did a test to see, are they faster? Are they not faster? And I've been getting this information from you guys for about 2 months now or so, for quite some time. So I know the answer to this, but I want to just share with you their information and then give you your information. Once again, there's a ton of feedback that I get from you guys, and that's what really makes this community how great it is. It has become an amazing place to be able to hang out and talk tech, talk photo, talk video, and more importantly, talk about SpaceX Starlink. An internet alternative for us that are in rural locations, or for people that are nomads, or someone that is in an RV, or they're on a boat or a plane. SpaceX Starlink is about all there is out there. There is others, of course. You have HughesNet and Viasat and all kinds of other stuff. At this point, they're pretty much junk and they will be going out of business. They'll be going the way of the dinosaur, right? The way of the dodo bird. So I've said this in the past, and I really believe that this will be the case. Now, bear in mind, if you don't know, if you've never been on this channel before, I've been doing this for about 35 months now. I picked up Starlink at the very beginning, just as it was coming out of beta. I have like dish number 2000, I think it is, of the version 2s. So I've been doing this once again for quite some time, and I've been sharing my experience with you guys. There is over, I would say about 280 videos now, somewhere right around there. There is a ton. Matter of fact, I'll leave a link over here. Don't click it yet. But after you're done watching this video, click on that and you'll see a ton of SpaceX Starlink, helpful how-tos, tips, tricks, what to do, what not to do, what to buy, what not to buy, how to do things, but more importantly, the why behind all of it. The same thing today's video. I'm going to give you the why you should upgrade or the why you should not upgrade. I think that that's really important, okay? Just because you know how to do something, that really doesn't make too much of a difference. You really need to know the why behind things. So anyways, that's what this channel is all about. If you enjoy this content, throw it a thumbs up. That'll be very helpful. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not. If you are, thank you. I appreciate you. Click this little button over here so when I go live, when a new video comes out, you will be notified of it immediately, if not sooner, if YouTube does their job properly. Also, if you want to give back to the channel, if you want to say thank you, there's a little button down here. You can click on that. Give $1 or $2 if you like. If not, that's perfectly fine. You're still going to get the same content. Consider becoming a member of the channel. That would be even better. And if you haven't downloaded any of my ebooks, they are free just for you being here. Go to JCristina.com/books. Once again, JCristina.com/books. So instead of me reading into this article, I'm just going to give you some of the highlights, and then I'll give you my experience, and then I'm going to give you your experience, everything that you have shared in the DMs and through social media, through all of the emails that I get, tons of email. I appreciate you guys for sharing. So anyways, let's start out with the difference between the Generation 2 and the Generation 4. That's usually what people have. I currently have my dishy, as I call Mr. Bevel. It's a Generation 2. So the year difference is 2021 is when the Generation 2 came out compared to 2024 when the Generation 4 was made available. Now the field of view is different. Now if you don't know, a field of view is like how much of the sky can the dish see? Now with the Generation 2, it can see about 100 degrees, whereas now the Generation 4 sees about 110. Maybe even 120 degrees, okay? It's seeing more of a greater size or greater swath of the sky. Now, you can see just with this image, there's a difference in size. The old version is 12 inches by 20 inches, where the new one is 15 inches by about almost 24 inches. So it is definitely larger, and the thickness is thinner. Why is it thinner? It's about 1.5 inches thick. The reason why it's thinner is because it doesn't have a motor in it anymore. The Generation 2 were fully articulated, meaning that they had motors in them, which made them thicker. That gives them the ability to kind of align themselves, whereas the Generation 4, you kind of have to do it for it because it only has a kickstand in comparison to the motors built in. Now, the weight of the units are pretty much the same, 6.5 pounds for the Generation 2, 7 pounds for the Generation 4. Even though the Generation 4 doesn't have the motors in it, it still is larger, so it's going to weigh a little bit more. Now, as far as the router itself, we're seeing a router that is a Wi-Fi 5 in the Generation 2, whereas you get into a Wi-Fi 6 with the Generation 4. I'll tell you why that's important in just a minute. Now, the power supply. A lot of you guys that are nomads or doing the RV life, or you're out there camping and whatnot, having a power supply that's external is really important. And they did this now. So the Generation 2 has an internal power supply, whereas the Generation 4 has that, or Generation 3 router has the power supply external. Having the power supply external is a lot easier for you to give it power, let's say through a battery or through some type of sine wave, some type of UPS, or whatever you want to use to be able to power it. So I do like having that power supply external to the system, external to the router. Now, as far as weatherproofing, the old version, or the version 2s, let's say, Generation 2s, had IP54. Now that is not bad. It's not the best, but it is not bad, whereas the new version does have the IP67. So what is the difference between an IP54 and an IP67? It's actually 67 Type 4. Is what the full name is. So with the IPv4, you're going to get a little bit less protection. You're going to have dust resistance with the IP54, and you're also going to get splash proof. Whereas with the IP67, that changes because now you're going to have that stronger protection. You're going to have not just dust protection, you're going to have something that is dust tight. Not only is it dust tight, but instead of being water, let's say splash proof, you're going to actually be able to submerge this thing in a meter of water for 30 minutes. So it can handle the extreme elements a lot better with the newer version, which is great. Now, wind speed is really important for me because we get hurricanes here. We get extreme weather. Look at the folks over there in Texas, Arkansas, some really bad weather. Now, can you secure the version 2s? Absolutely. Well, the version 4s, according to what they're stating, is instead of having a 50 mile per hour rating with the version 2s, the version 4s, they get a 60 mile per hour rating. This is kind of BS in my personal opinion because I've had my dishy up there during the outskirts of a hurricane, and Mr. Bevel was getting hit with probably about 80 mile per hour gusts, and it had no problem with it at all. So in my personal opinion, 50 mile per hour, 60 mile per hour really doesn't make too much of a difference. They're going to be on par with each other. Now, also when it comes to power, the version 2 uses between 50 and 75 watts of power. This could be important, once again, for campers, RVers, nomads. Whereas the new version uses 75 to 100 watts of power. Now that could be because it is just simply bigger. It's just a larger unit, right? It has more little nodules, more antennae, let's say, in it, so on and so forth. Now, when we look at the router provides 802.11, A, B, G, N, AC. Well, the new one also gives you AX. What does that mean? That means the old router is a Wi-Fi 5 router, whereas the new router that comes with the Generation 4, which is actually a Generation 3 router, don't get it all crazy, but the new version, let's say, does give you AX, which is a version 6. So it's Wi-Fi 6. Now, what is the difference between a Wi-Fi 5 and a Wi-Fi 6? So what exactly is the difference between a Wi-Fi 5 router and a Wi-Fi 6 router, or an AC router and an AX router? Well, in simple terms, I just wrote down a couple of bullet points because I think that this is important that you know. Number one, you get faster speeds with the Wi-Fi 6, improved efficiency, better in dense areas. So if there's a lot of devices using the router at the same time, the Wi-Fi 6 is just simply going to do a better job. Also, you get lower latency. It can do what it does quicker, right? Less latency is always better latency. And of course, you get enhanced security with the Wi-Fi 6. Now, they don't talk about it in here, but you also get that signal pushed out further. So you get to cover more square footage, let's say, with the Wi-Fi 6. Now, maybe we should get into the bands right away because this is kind of important. The older router, the Generation 2, provides you with a dual band setup, which is a 3x3 MU MIMO setup. Now, if you guys don't know, MU MIMO stands for multi-user, multi-input, multi-output. So if you hear that ever, you know what MIMO actually is. Now, the new router actually gives you a tri-band. So it is a 4x4 MIMO, or a multi-user, multi-input, multi-output type of device. That is one of the things that also helps with the connection speeds, but it also helps with that density. So if you have a ton of devices on the system simultaneously, you're going to be able to get faster speeds just because of how the architecture works. Now, like I said before, the new router will push the signal out further. The old router will give you about 2,000 square foot of coverage, whereas the new router gives you all the way up to 3,200 square foot of coverage. That's a big deal. The other thing is when you're developing a mesh network and you want to connect multiple of these devices together to form a mesh network, the old system will allow you to get 3 nodes connected to it. So you have your main and then you have 3 nodes. Well, the new one only allows you 3 nodes also. But the difference is you can use the older version 2s if you want with a version 4 setup with the new version. So that's really nice because if you're upgrading from a version 2 to the latest and greatest version 4, that old router that you have will be able to be used as a node or an access point or as an AP to form a mesh network. So you're going to get even more coverage. So even though that old router will only cover 2,000 square feet, doesn't really matter. The new one covers 3,200, whereas the old one covers 2,000. You can put that at the other side of the house. Now you're golden. Or if you have a multi-story house, you can take the one router that's at the base, let's say, with your 3,200, and then right above it, literally right above it, you can put the other one and then it will cover 2,000 square feet. Or you can have a total of 4 in totality. So you can buy 3 of these nodes. So if you wanted to, you can buy 3 additional version 2s and use them with your latest and greatest version. Or you can get new ones. It's completely up to you. But it's nice having this ability to use the older one if you need to, especially if you're upgrading. Now, the last thing is the number of devices. Like I said, that due to the fact that it is an AX router compared to the AC, it does allow for more devices to be on simultaneously. So the old router will allow you to have 128 devices simultaneously working. How well they work, that's a different story. Whereas the new one gives the ability to have 235 simultaneous devices. I don't know about you, but I don't have 235 devices in the house or even in the office. That is a lot of devices. So is this really important? Not so much. But what is important is that efficiency, like I told you before, and how that it lowers latency and how it actually traverses the data with the new version in comparison to the old version. So let's get into the meat and potatoes here. What are the speeds? What is the upload speed? What is the download speed? What does the latency look like? Which is better, right? So they showed some of these speeds, and I'm going to tell you some of your speeds in just a second. But as far as theirs, they gave us a high speed for the download and a low speed for the download and then a mean. For me, the mean here is more important because honestly, you're going to get fast speeds and you can get slow speeds on every system. But what is that average? What is the mean? That is most important. And that's what I tell you guys to do. If you're going to do speed tests to see how fast your Starlink is or even your internet is, I would do 10 tests, all using the exact same server, and then add up all of your speed and then divide it by the total number of tests. And then you'll have that mean or you'll have that average. So you get an idea because then once again, you're going to get some slow and you're going to get some fast. So their mean looks like this. The red is the version 2s, whereas the blue is the version 4s. And as we can see, there is definitely a speed increase. The download speed, when we look at this average, we're seeing about 120 to about 130 on the download with the version 2, whereas with the version 4, we're seeing speeds between 130 and 170, somewhere around there. So there is an increase. Now, this is not as big of an increase that you guys have been telling me over the last couple of months in email, once again on social media, through DMs and whatnot. Now, what I do find interesting here is the max speed, or the highest download speed that they're able to get. I think this is important also. Even though I don't like to look at the highs, I don't like to look at the lows, these highs definitely point in a certain direction. So we see with the version 2, anywhere between 225 to 250 is that maximum speed, the highest rate. Whereas when we look at the version 4, we're seeing 340 all the way up to like 405. Now, once again, this does not translate because when we look at the means, there's only about a 30 megabit difference. So these are like spikes, but look at those spikes. What that means to me is simply this, guys. If you're using a version 4, all right, and a version 2 mini satellite comes overhead, this thing really shines, okay? Somehow this version 4 is definitely dialed in to the latest and greatest satellites overhead. That's my personal opinion. I'm guessing here because when we see the version 2s having a speed between 225 and 250 on the high side, nothing above that, and then we see the version 4s that are spiking up to 405, there is something going on there. Now, before I go any further, I have to say my personal speed that I have seen is up to about 340, 360 down. So while they're seeing this constant speed of 225 to 250, I actually saw some 300, 340, 360, like what they were seeing with the version 4s. So is this a fluke? Maybe during day 1, day 2, day 3, they didn't catch it when there was a version 2 mini overhead? That's a possibility. So I'm not sure what's going on here. Maybe it's like I said before, the version 4s are more dialed in to the new satellites that are up there, the version 2 minis. I'm not really sure. But anyways, it's something to look at. Now, when it comes to upload speeds, we're just going to look at the average because that is the most important thing instead of looking at the highs and the lows. The average here are pretty much on par. If we look at it, we see a minimum on the version 2s of, let's say, 18.9, let's call it 19, to, let's say, 23. Where we see the version 4 is getting about 21 to, let's say, just under 24. So the upload speed is maybe 1 megabit, maybe 2 megabits faster. That is it, according to what they're seeing. Now, once again, what are you guys seeing? According to what you're seeing, you're seeing about 2 to 5 megabits faster. So there is definitely a quicker speed when it comes to the uploads, according to you guys, in comparison to what they're getting. But either way, it is a small amount in comparison to what we're seeing with the download speeds. Now, when we get into latency, latency is big. Jitter is big. If you don't know what jitter is, I'm not going to cover it in this video, but latency and jitter are very important. But when we look at the latency, they're nearly identical. Maybe it's 1 millisecond faster, but that could just be a fluke. I don't even want to go by this. Let's just call it on par. It's literally the same. Now, when we look at all of this information, is this something that you should purchase? Should you upgrade your version 1, your version 2, your version 3 to this latest version 4? Is this something that you should do? And I really think there's a couple of questions that you need to ask yourself. Number one, do you have an extra $600 laying around for you to buy the new kit? Because according to SpaceX Starlink, when I did my research, there is no like trade-in as of right now and say, listen, I want a version 4 kit. Can I give you my version 2 and you hand over some money? Supposedly they were giving at one time like a $200 rebate if you did that, or $200 on your kit if you sent it back into them. I don't know if they're still doing that, but that's something that you could look into. But either way, you're looking at an outlay of money, no matter what. Also, you want to look at, is the faster speed, is the better wind, let's say, resistance, water resistance, and that larger Wi-Fi area, that type of thing, is that enough for you to make that move? Some people will say, listen, every little tiny bit of speed is good for me. I'll pay the difference. Or maybe you're in a location that has extreme dust storms. You're in the desert. Well, that new version that is really sealed with your IP67 compared to your IP54, yes, that is definitely a way to go. Or for me, if you have some severe winds, let's say, some really bad rains, maybe that's something to look at. Or like I said before, if you want to push that signal a little bit further and you don't want to make a mesh network, maybe going with that would be good for you. Now, a couple of the downsides that you need to be aware of here is number one, you're going to have a power difference. So if you're an RV or a nomad or some type of person that is in a tent and you're using battery power, well, there's anywhere from about a 25 to 50 watt increase in using this version 4 comparison to using the version 2. That's a big difference. Remember, even though the version 2 has the motor in it, the motors don't work, all right? They're not doing anything. It's not like it's tracking live or something. The motor's just there to track when it needs to. The other thing is since it doesn't have a motor, right, you actually have to position it yourself. Now, if you're going to set this thing up on the second story somewhere, all right, and you dial it in using your phone, right, as they tell you to, a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, you're good, right? You crank it in, you're good there. Well, if SpaceX Starlink changes the location in the future, you're going to have to get up there and now move it. If not, your speeds aren't going to be great, right? Well, not really. The reason being is, while it's really good having a fully articulating or a unit that has a motor in it, you don't have to do anything, you don't have to touch it, it does its own thing. The gist of the matter is simply this. As there's more and more satellites overhead, the dish no longer has to be pointed in a certain direction. Once again, the view has gone from 100 to like 110, 120 degrees, so it's seeing, once again, a bigger swath of the sky, but also there's more satellites in the sky that it sees. So instead of seeing 1 or 2 satellites, now that there's 6,000 up there, maybe it's seeing 4 or 5. So it doesn't really need to point in a certain direction. And I'm going to venture to say in the next maybe 4 to 6 months, they're going to say you don't need to point it any direction. Just point it straight up and it's good. Remember, even the business class dish, right? The ones that are flat, the ones that you mount on top of an airplane, you mount on top of a boat, on the top of a camper or an RV, those are flat, but they still have a slight angle to them. But that angle is just for runoff. It's like a 15% or a 10% grade to it. It's for just running the rain off or the snow or whatnot. That's it. It's not to point it in any direction. So moving forward, even with residential, I seriously doubt you're going to have to point in any direction. So even with this newer version, you're really not going to need the motors in the future. So that's not really that big of a deal. I think the biggest deal is going to be, once again, a nomad, an RV, or someone that's camping, someone that's using battery power. To use the new one is going to now take 25 to 50 watts more, but it does have that external power supply, so you can feed it a lot more easily. So I hope this information helps you decide one way or another. I want to hear from you. What did you go with? Did you go with the version 4? Did you go with an older version? Did you buy a refurbished version like I've told you guys to get in the past? So instead of paying the $600, you're only going to pay $400, $200 cheaper, and you're going to get the same warranty. Check them out. Why not? If they're available in your area, pick up a refurbished. I would suggest it. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, throw it a thumbs up. That's always helpful. Don't forget to subscribe. And finally, head over to my website, JCristina.com, where you can find all the photography tools and all of my merch and tees and shirts and cups and mugs and all kinds of other stuff. Pick something up. Also, check out my book, How to Create a Digital Fort Knox, Backing Up Your Digital Life. I have a free version of the prologue that you can pick up. Once again, going over to JCristina.com/books. Many thanks for being here. Many blessings to you and your family. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay connected, and we'll see you in the next one. Love you all.